I could almost feel the hammering in my chest as I crept toward the old farmhouse. Grandpa's footsteps echoed on the creaking floorboards. Mira took my hand, squeezing it. "I'm here," she whispered. Those 2 words gave me the strength to cross the threshold. The ghosts of the past linger in places like this. But I am not the same girl who fled in the dead of night. I return now not as a victim, but as a seeker of justice, ready to show that time and truth have undone the power of my fears. My name is Lillian Morgan, though many now call me Grandma Lillian. I never imagined that my old bones would one day take me back to Ravenwood, Ohio, the place where my story began in silence and shadow. But here I stand, stepping through the threshold of the farmhouse where secrets were buried deep under wood and dust. This is part 1 of my journey, and if you're listening from anywhere out there, please leave a comment and subscribe. Some truths must echo beyond a single lifetime. I grew up in Ravenwood in the late 1940s. Our home was a modest clapboard house nestled just outside the town's edges. In the front yard, lilies bloomed every spring, their white petals trembling in the breeze. The air always carried the tang of corn husks and fresh earth. My grandmother, Eleanor, kept a rose garden and would say the scent of a rose was like forgiveness given in silence. My mother, Ada, was fairy thin and brilliant, always reading by lamplight or sketching the rolling hills in charcoal. My father, Jonathan Harwell, was a stoic man, tall and muscular from years in the coal mines farther east. He spoke little, but his eyes held storms. He would return home dusty, sweat mingling with coal dust, and nod once at the dinner table. But even in silence, his presence dominated. I was their only child. Mama often called me Lil, tucked me into bed, brushed my hair, and told me family legends as the wind rattled the shutters. She painted a vision of strength, of hidden roots that ran through generations, of a heritage neither shame nor fear could uproot. Everything changed the winter I was 11. Mama began to sicken. Night coughs, fever, pale cheeks, and quietly, she slipped to days of weakness. I watched her shrink under the lamp's glow, her laughter dimming. Father would go farther and stay longer, claiming he had to borrow more hours in the mine to purchase her treatments. Mama, though faint, kept her rituals, brushing my hair, reminding me, "There is power in gentleness, Lil." She hid in the attic sometimes, and once I saw her open a battered wooden chest under cover of twilight, then slip something small inside her dress. One evening, I came home from school and the house was full of neighbors. Mrs. Durham wept in my arms. Mama had passed quietly in the night. Tuberculosis, they said. In the coffin I saw her face. Resting, serene. Father showed no emotion. That night, I waited in my bed for her to return with a story, but only the wind came. I cried until exhaustion claimed me, clutching the doll she made. Then the darkness began. Father stopped speaking to me, or when he did, his tone cut like cold steel. He took to drinking. A single phrase haunted me. "You took her from me." He would say it in his sleep. He began roaming the halls at night, sometimes pausing outside my door. At first, I reasoned it was his grief. But soon, the whispers began. "Your mother never loved you," he hissed in the darkness. "If she did, she would still be here." The voice was low but potent, poison in a child's ear. Night after night, he would lean over my bed, breath thick with spirits, and inject doubt into my heart. Over time, I forgot the sound of her laugh. By 13, I was hollow. Too ashamed to tell the neighbors, too afraid to speak. At school I withdrew. Mrs. Pearson noticed and patted my hair, called me bright, if quiet. She tried to coax me into conversations. I wished I could tell her. But the words lodged behind my throat, bound by fear. Inside the house, Father locked everything. Drawers, cupboards, even the pantry. In the small study was a safe, a heavy iron door bolted into the wall. I glimpsed it once when he was intoxicated, the safe slightly open, but I dared not approach. Everything my mother once held, her journals, a locket, soft letters, must lie inside. One autumn day, a neighbor, Miss Constance, approached me in the yard. "Lillian, Your mother used to confide in me. She asked that if anything ever happened, you should come see me. Her eyes flickered, anxious, before feeling guilt. Fear, she said quietly. She was hiding things. Be careful. She slipped me a letter, folded small and brittle. I tucked it inside my bodice, heart pounding. I held that letter for weeks. I dared not open it in daylight. At night, I would lie awake, listening for Father's footsteps, reading and rereading the words, seeking validation in her handwriting. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. Then came the chance. Father announced he was selling the house and emigrating to another state. He hired men to empty the rooms. The day he forced open the safe seemed to me like the end of everything. I felt the floor slip beneath me. The proof that Mama had left me, everything, would be lost to Father's iron will. I raced to Miss Constance's home that morning. She said through tears, "He's breaking into the study now." Panic froze me. I said, "Let me go in." She hesitated, and then nodded. We enacted a simple plan. She would knock at the front door, claiming an emergency about unpaid rent on the abandoned farm next door. Father would be distracted. Meanwhile, I would slip into the back, use a skeleton key Mama left me in a note, and enter the study. When I heard her pounding and Father's curt voice, I ran. The study door was ajar. He must have forced it already. I pushed inside. The safe was open. I approached trembling. Inside I saw a folded envelope and something wrapped in faded silk. I tore out the envelope, then unfolded the silk to reveal Mama's shawl and a pendant engraved with her name. My whole body shook. I clasped both items to my chest as if they were a lifeline. I fled the house by the back way, racing breathless to Miss Constance's calm reassurance. Together, we opened the envelope. It contained cash, enough for train fare, and another letter. The safe's actual key was hidden behind the molding of the living room portrait. Mama's words. "Lil, I never left you. Every step I took for you. When you read this, I hope you find strength. Buy a passage to Chicago. Find Aunt Eudora there. She will take you in. Never believe his lies about me. His grief turned him cruel. But you deserve love." The silk hid a locket with her portrait inside. I held it to my heart. That was the moment I made my decision. I would escape that night, run away before Father took me elsewhere. Miss Constance arranged a ticket and gave me food and clothes. She asked, "Should we go to the authorities?" I shook my head. Who would believe a child accused of her father's corruption? No, I would leave it all behind. At night, with trembling limbs, I boarded the train to Chicago, clutching the shawl, the locket, the letters. As the station receded behind me, I whispered to my mother, "I'm coming home." Fear and hope warred in my chest as the rails carried me forward. In Chicago, I found Aunt Eudora in a small flat on the south side. She didn't know I existed, but when she saw me, ragged, trembling, she cried. She had some faded photographs of Mama and recognized the pendant immediately. She sheltered me. But I still carried the terror inside. At night I dreamed of Father breaking walls, chasing me, forcing me back to darkness. I told Aunt Eudora fragments of myself, my mother's death, my escape, but not the whispers. Shame tucked itself into my voice. She cradled me, declared I was safe. One chilly morning, Aunt Eudora took me by the hand to the local precinct. She said sternly, "It's time." I protested I was scared. She squeezed me. "You are not alone." We met with Officer Marsh. I handed over the pendant, the locket, Mama's letter, and told as much of the story as my voice would allow. The officer listened. He documented it. And though I feared Father would retaliate, I dared hope this truth might shield me. That night I lay in Aunt Eudora's bed, the weight on my chest feeling lighter than it had in years. This was not the end, but the beginning of reclaiming my life. Time passed. I enrolled in night school, worked in a dressmaker's shop, sewed dresses and dreams together. Over the years, I wove a life from threads of survival and purpose. But the old house in Ravenwood haunted me. Years later, when father died of his vices and sorrow, I traveled back with my husband, Robert, and my daughters. The house stood boarded and overgrown. We stepped through halls where shadows lingered. And as I touched the cold metal of the safe, I felt no terror. I felt triumph. I have survived, and neither grief nor lies govern me now. I never expected to return to that house again. Years had passed since I last set foot in Ravenwood. Time had done its quiet work. My children had grown, Robert had passed on, and my hands had begun to tremble more than they used to. But one thing never trembled: my memory. It was sharp as ever, a compass that had always pointed toward the truth, no matter how far it had been buried. The house was crumbling now. Weeds overtook the porch where Mama once sipped tea. The lilies were gone, replaced by brambles and silence. But the structure still stood, stubborn and waiting. When I crossed the threshold, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't that little girl anymore. I was Lillian Morgan. Grandmother, mother, seamstress, survivor. Robert had passed away peacefully in his sleep just 3 years prior. Nearly 50 years of marriage, a lifetime of gentle words and strong hands that never once made me flinch. His death left a quiet ache, but it was an ache of gratitude, not trauma. He had taught me that love could be kind. He had shown me what safety felt like. Now it was time to close the circle. My daughter Mira had insisted on driving me down from Columbus. She sat with me as I entered the living room, now blanketed with dust and cobwebs. She didn't ask questions. She knew. She always knew, even though I had only ever told her pieces of the truth. "Do what you need to do, Mama," she said, and kissed my forehead. The living room still held that same heavy silence. But in the corner, covered by a moldy tarp, was the portrait of my parents. And just as the letter had said decades ago, I reached behind the frame and felt it, the ridged edge of a small brass key. The original safe key. My hands trembled as I held it. Not with fear, but with something fiercer: resolve. "I should have had this years ago," I whispered. The safe was still embedded in the study wall. Empty now, yes, but symbolic. I unlocked it anyway, just to hear the soft click. Just to remind myself that no matter what had been stolen from me, I had reclaimed it all in the end. Later that day, Mira and I met with a local attorney. I had discovered the deed to the house had never been formally transferred. It was still in my father's name. That meant as his last living heir, it belonged to me. "I don't want the house," I told the lawyer. "I want what it owes me." So we made a decision. The land would be sold. The money would be put into a fund. Not for me, but for something greater. I started a scholarship in Mama's name, the Ada Harwell Foundation for Young Girls. The money would help girls from rural areas like Ravenwood attend school, escape cycles of poverty and silence, and find their voice. Each dollar that came from this poisoned soil would now nurture something new. The town didn't understand at first. But they remembered me. The quiet girl who had vanished. Now the grandmother who returned with a firm voice and a mission. But there was one last thing I had to do. I returned to the precinct where I once sat trembling with Aunt Eudora. Of course, it was a different building now. Officer Marsh was long gone. But the records were still there. My report. My mother's letters. The testimony I gave as a girl. I requested a copy. The young clerk handed it to me and said, "You were very brave." I smiled softly and nodded. I didn't feel brave. I felt whole. On the drive back to Columbus, Mira asked, "Did you get everything you came for?" I looked out the window as the hills of Ravenwood disappeared behind us. Yes. Everything. And more. In the following months, something miraculous happened. The scholarship drew attention. Other women from towns like mine came forward, telling their own stories of secrets kept and burdens carried alone. A journalist from Cincinnati contacted me. She wanted to write about my journey, not just the horror, but the quiet resilience of women who rebuild their lives in silence. I'm not interested in becoming famous, I told her. I understand, she said. But your story might save someone else. So I told it. In full. No more shadows. The article was published. Emails poured in. Grandmothers, young women, school teachers, foster mothers. Each letter is a note in a song I never expected to hear, the sound of collective survival. Years later, when I turned 80, Mira printed them all into a book. She called it The Shawl and the Safe. On the cover was a photo of me as a young girl, sitting on Mama's lap, her face glowing with love. The book didn't make me rich, but it made me free. And that, my dears, is the greatest justice of all. To every woman or girl listening to this, if you are in a place of fear or pain, I want you to know something. You do not have to stay. You do not have to be silent. You are not unworthy, not broken beyond repair, not the sum of what was done to you. The voice inside you, the whisper that says, maybe there's more, is your compass. I listened to that voice. I followed it through miles of fear and darkness. And it brought me here. To this moment, TOU. So if my story has touched you, I ask only this: don't let it end with me. Share it. Speak it. Let your own voice rise up like the wind over the hills of Ravenwood. There is healing in truth. There is power in survival. And there is redemption waiting in the quiet corners of every broken house, in the dust of old safes, in the strength of a grandmother's trembling hand. I am Lillian Morgan. I am 83 years old. I have lived, loved, lost, and found myself again. And I am not afraid anymore. If you've stayed through this story, thank you from the deepest part of my heart. Please don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Some stories don't end, they ripple through generations. Let this be one of them.